So, you've been asked to stop DEI, but you don't want to, and you know that it won't be attractive to your potential new hire market. So, some research based perspective is coming up shortly. And here we are on the HR Hub podcast with me, Andrea Adams. Keep listening to learn about this and all kinds of things related to HR. You can also find me on YouTube. So, today my guest is Dr. Catherine Connelly. I found her by asking ChatGPT for an expert on the future of work. She's an HR professor and researcher who looks at workplace behavior, employee well-being, and diversity. She's written a book. How many books?
One book. Many articles.
And authored many papers. I think research is one of the best paths we have towards greater truth. So I'm happy to have her again. Hi, Catherine. How are you?
Hi, it's great to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. And have you back again. One of the last ones we did is doing quite well. But today we're going to talk about DEI. So when we decided to talk about this topic, you said this was something, or this was a question you were being asked a lot. So can you tell us a little more about what you've been hearing?
Yes. So a lot of companies are reacting to what's going on in the United States right now. And so companies in the United States have been told, cancel all their DEI efforts, wipe it from their website, pretend that structural racism and everything related to gender, etc., is gone, right? So in the companies in the US, it's dire. And so Canadian companies are left to wonder, okay, what does that mean for us? And so I've been hearing a lot of debates about what is the best way to approach this. And so some companies are saying, okay, how do we, quote unquote, get ahead of this? And so they are anticipating what's going on and they're trying to figure out how to react. And other companies are saying, okay, well, we know we're going to continue it, but just let's figure out the best way to continue it while making it look like we're not. And so it's worth giving some serious thought to this because so much thought went into putting together these programs and setting this all up. And so on a dime, how are we going to respond to what's going on in the US while still being true to our own values and our own strategies and our own expectations?
So in Canada, and perhaps other countries around the world that were really engaged in DEI, we are not seeing this enormous and fast shift away from DEI.
Well, so it's interesting because we've seen just recently in relation to Pride Month in Ontario and Toronto in particular, and the sponsorship for Pride has changed since last year. So Google and Home Depot have significantly reduced their support for this. And so things have changed in a very short amount of time, whereas before they would donate considerable sums of money, and this would be part of their flagship corporate social responsibility. We're engaged in our community. This is just who we are. And now they're not, right? So we'll see what the tipping point really turns into and how this will unfold. But it's not just a threat of change. I'd say there's changes happening.
Yeah, I would point out that both Google and Home Depot are American companies.
Yes.
And so a lot of the episode that, like what we're going to talk about today, is when your head office in the United States has said stop. I do see, though, like one thing switch I see happening in Canada is, say, for example, the University of Alberta, and it got quite a few headlines, switched from DEI to inclusion and belonging, I think it was. You know, what do you think about that kind of approach? Or are we going to talk about that as an option for a path forward?
Yeah, so we can talk about it, but I think that's a terrible option. So,
okay, why?
Well, okay. So the thing with these edicts from on high that you don't agree with and that you think are a sign of oligarchy or tyranny or something that you do not agree with, the thing is, number one rule is do not obey in advance, right? So if you have not even been required to change this and you
Okay.
don't want to change it, don't just change it proactively, right?
Mhm.
There's no reason to just cave or bend at the knee before you need to. So forget that. And it's important on certain things to take the stand. Just keep on going with exactly what you were doing already.
Mhm.
And presumably you have metrics to show that what you were doing was working and that's why
Mhm.
you were doing it.
Mhm.
So you would continue in that vein, right? Until, God forbid, it actually happens and you're told, no, it absolutely must be changed. In that case, okay, then you can start thinking about how do we continue to do the work that we want to do, even if we can't call it
Yeah. Yeah.
what it was called before.
And we are going to have that discussion. But before we get there, I want to ask about like what we see happening in the United States right now. I don't know how much of it's political and how much of it is actually is a legal thing. What is the change we're seeing there? Is it political or is it legal?
Yeah, so at this point, it's very uncertain because so much of things like employment laws are at one level of government.
Yeah.
And what we have seen from the US right now is not that the laws have changed, it's just been executive orders. And so that is why there's been so many appeals and appeals and appeals, but the legality of this has not yet been established. And so for these companies that are trying to figure out how to respond to this, it's difficult because there's going to be a lot of back and forth and back and forth. And that uncertainty is really difficult for organizations to deal with. And so to me, it's another argument for just keeping things the way they are.
Mm,
Don't just change it overnight because it's going to have to change and change and change and change if you're just kind of going with how the wind is blowing, right? So if
right.
you have something that works for you, just keep it.
Yeah. DEI sort of came on like a tidal wave. Like
Mhm.
it did exist, say in the early 2010s. But then, I don't know, sometime around COVID, maybe a couple of years before COVID, it just got this huge momentum and everybody jumped on the bandwagon. And and I did a whole live podcast about this where we discussed the fact that some of our implementation of DEI was terrible. So is this just this shift here? Is it just a righting of the ship?
Yeah, so it's a real shame how this is all unfolding because I worry that it is going to preclude us from being able to have like a reasonable
Mhm.
discussion about what is working, what is not working when it comes to
Yes.
DEI. Like what is actually effective, what might be counterproductive, and to just have these reasonable discussion between people who all want to do things properly. So it'll be a shame if we end up with this kind of knee jerk, it has to be not at all, or it has to be this way. And if you dispute that, you're on one side or the other, because it's sort of counterproductive.
That's the nature of doing things, of learning and doing it better, not burning it to the ground.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because when you look at other aspects of companies, like maybe you don't like the recent rollout of your HRIS platform. If just because you don't like how it's working, it doesn't mean that you go back to using carbon paper, right?
Right.
And
Yes.
so other parts of the company are allowed to have things that need to be tweaked or improved or changed and made better. I think DEI should be allowed that type of opportunity as well.
Agreed. 100%. Well said. Okay. So, how can HR professionals, especially those who are not in the United States, but it probably applies to them too, because there's tons of HR professionals in the States who are totally passionate about DEI and now they're probably deeply discouraged about having to you know, to minimize their programs or get rid of them altogether. What advice do you have for HR professionals navigating this?
I have tons of advice. So
Yay, go
I'm
for it.
full of advice. So I think the first thing would be to focus on their processes, right? So the employment cycle, tip to tail, beginning to end, kind of how are EDI principles baked into that? And fundamentally, what we were trying to do is to get the best possible people working in our company, right? And
Uh-huh.
so EDI is a good part of that. I mean, you want to make sure that your recruitment messages and your selection processes, that these don't have unnecessary barriers, and that you are bringing in the best people, right? And so you're going to want to track on several different metrics to make sure that your messaging is broad and that people are coming into the company at the proportions that you would expect. And so going back to your point about University of Alberta remessaging things about community and inclusion, I like the sound of that, right? So like who can disagree with community or inclusion or all these things? The trick is behind the scenes, you'll still be aware of the structural barriers that might make it less likely for someone from a certain postal code to find out about your company and that it's so great. Things like that. So once they're there, you will act to include them. And then when you're trying to think about your talent management programs and identifying high potential hires, you'll track them throughout the company. You'll keep your mentorship programs and you'll work through the possible issues in terms of making sure people are matched and so on. So I don't want to say it's business as usual, but in a lot of ways, they're kind of fundamental HR things that have EDI not as this separate entity, especially in a smaller organizations. It's at every stage and step of everything that you do.
It's interesting. This just sort of brings up for me that, like, as a consultant, I'm going into organizations all the time and I'm writing their policies. And being a Canadian consultant, I'm still putting in DEI policies. But I feel like every time I do this, the elephant is in the room. Like, are we still going forward with DEI? Is DEI still going to be a thing in Canada, even though, there's this reverse tidal wave in the United States of taking it all out? I have that question in my mind that has actually been sort of subconscious that I'm only surfacing now. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to my first point, which is do not obey in advance, right? So do
Right.
not anticipate that they don't want DEI. And if you've always included it, continue to include it. If they don't want it, they can take it out. But there's a chance that they would like to have it. And as a consultant, you can provide the language for the policy and you can do it in the way that it should be done. And they can take it and use it as they're going to.
I think we need to advocate for it too. And I think it also goes back to something like just the principle of do what you know is right. Because you take DEI out and you make the work and facilitate a workplace that is uncomfortable for over half of the people. Well, guess what? Guess how much talent you're missing. That was just a personal thing that I hadn't really consciously processed yet.
No, I think a lot of people are going through that similar calculus, right? And
Mhm.
so, like, you want to provide a service that people will be happy with. But the thing is, you don't want to anticipate that they don't want DEI. And so you
Mhm.
can just put it in there. It's part of your service. You provide wraparound full service. If they're not going to, okay, you can't force them to do it if you're their
Yeah.
consultant,
But it's
right?
also provide some leadership.
Yeah.
Like HR is providing leadership and we need to provide leadership on this. So,
I absolutely agree. And I think it's important to feel comfortable standing out.
yep.
And so I think when things are uncertain, there's a little bit of feeling, oh, maybe I'm safer if I just kind of blend in a little bit. But I think if you know what you believe about something, and this is the way you've always been doing it, it's the time to continue that and just be ready to stand out a little bit and defend what you think. And then there you go.
are there, related to what you said, are there any legal risks in Canada if we stop DEI?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so the entire apparatus in Canada has certain expectations about people being treated fairly. And
Mhm.
so companies have gone to great lengths to demonstrate that they do not discriminate on the basis of several relevant grounds. And so part of that is demonstrating the steps that they take to make sure that the processes that they have are fair. And so, if a company is to suddenly withdraw all of that, or to suddenly adjust their processes in a way that is less procedurally fair, then they would leave themselves open to accusations that, oh, I was fired because I was pregnant, or I
Mm,
didn't get this promotion because I'm not white, right?
mhm,
And so, companies have done quite a bit so far in order to protect themselves. And so to just suddenly dissolve that, of course, yeah, that's going to leave them open to all kinds of accusations.
mhm. So effectively, it's insurance.
Partly it's insurance because it also prevents some of the discrimination
Right.
as well. So,
That too. It's
yeah,
not just surface uh, insurance, it's actual insurance.
we
Yes.
hope. We hope.
Okay. In this question, I'm really curious about from a researcher perspective, what does the research say about the parts of DEI that are effective, that are delivering results in creating a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive workforce?
Right. So, usually when people think about DEI, they think about DEI training.
Yes.
And it's unfortunate because, especially mandatory DEI training, it's not demonstrated as being terribly effective. It's the sort of thing where like people's heart is in the right place, and I think in HR training is the solution to many problems, and often it is the solution. But when you look at people's implicit biases, these are often very fundamental. They don't necessarily even know that they have them. So the odds of a 30-minute online training that's mandatory that they might be completing while they're doing some other task, the likelihood of this being effective, that's small.
Is it better than nothing?
Not necessarily.
Oh no.
Depends on the quality of the training. Depends on the trainer.
Mhm.
There are some really terrible training programs out there where people feel attacked, people feel on
Mhm.
the spot, people are outed. Like, you hear these horror stories, and every time you hear them, you just think, oh, why did you have to do that? And so,
Right. That relates to our learning to do better, learning what not to do. Anyway,
yeah.
so what else doesn't work or what does work?
Yeah. So I always come back to processes, right? And so if you think about principles of procedural justice, where a process has to be repeatable, it has to be the same for everyone, it should be appealable. All of these systematic processes, once they are in place, it has the advantage of being equitable, right? But it also
Uh-huh.
has the advantage where everyone will feel it is fair. And when people feel that this process is fair, they trust the organization, they're more likely to be motivated. They'll engage in those extra behaviors that aren't even in their job description. And they'll feel this sense of community with the organization. That's someplace that they want to be. So there's basically unlimited positive outcomes associated with these fair processes, and there's no downside, right? So the more we can focus on making sure these processes are solid processes and that they are implemented effectively, then we're set.
A pushback I get on developing process is that process itself is expensive. Like, it's a four-letter word.
Sure, everything's expensive, right? Anything you put time into is expensive because of the time, but you just have to think of the full cost of not having effective processes. And
Mm.
so, how much time are you going to waste coming up with a new process each time? And how much time are you going to waste trying to explain everything to your employees about why it's different, why we don't do it that way
Oh,
anymore? And then how expensive is it to have people leave, especially good people, because they
yes.
notice that, oh, this was the process for me, and now that's the process for them. So it's a little bit of upfront work, but then at least
Yeah.
you can be intentional about how you want everything to unfold. And then you're doing it the way that you want it to be. And then once that's decided, then it can just unfold. So sometimes it's faster to go slow, right? So you just
Mm,
invest a little bit at the beginning and then everything is set. And it's the same you would do for other aspects of your company.
yeah. Okay. So if someone wants to learn more about this topic or learn more about you, do you have any suggestions?
So this topic is top of mind for a lot of people, and I would actually suggest that people go and look up Timothy Snyder's work and just Google Timothy Snyder um, 20 tips fighting tyranny. And
Oh.
you will see a bunch of lessons that don't all apply to HR, but there's a lot that does. And the first rule is don't obey in advance. I think that's something that applies to a lot of situations. Um, but there's also ideas in there about defending institutions. So, for example, if your organization feels that museums are important or libraries are important or something like that, then adopt that, help it, build your community that way. Build the community of your employees, allow them to get to know each other because it's sort of a unsettled time right now.
Mm-hmm.
And organizations and employees can really benefit from spending time together and building things up.
Uh, what about you? Where can they find you?
Oh, they can find me anytime. So they can friend me on LinkedIn, Catherine Connelly, or they can look at the connellyresearch.com website where they can see more of my research,
Mm-hmm.
or they can visit the Mac Crew website. This is my new center. It's the McMaster Center for Research on Employment and Work. And they
Oh,
can see all kinds of research by other McMaster professors right there. Or they can reach out to me. I'm just an email away. They can email me at connell@mcmaster.ca. And I'm always curious to hear what other people are thinking about.
hmm. Wonderful. Okay. I will put all those links in either embedded in the video or in the show notes or both. Well, thanks, Catherine. That was reassuring and bolstering. And I have to check out that list from Timothy Snyder. We have, however, reached the end of this episode. Thanks for listening out there, and we'll catch you next time when I talk with another insightful guest.